Sigma. Hmm, this is a tough one. You see, I always got this impression that people thought Sigma was a big brain tank, but I started to realize that wasn't really the case. He's kind of more intermediate, but I don't know where intermediate. See, here's the thing. I can actually hear out arguments for Sigma actually being a low skill tank, even though it doesn't seem like it. Because in reality, it's like, okay, you shoot things with relatively big projectiles that deal splash damage. You have a shield that you can kind of put wherever you want, and it's not attached to you. And because you're not Reinhardt, you actually have a ranged attack. You don't have to deal with all the unique problems Reinhardt has with his shield, which means, despite the fact that it has more freedom, it actually makes Sigma a lower skill character because you don't have to overcome as much and play around as much to use your shield effectively. His rock is pretty simple as well. It's just an aim thing, and his grasp is again pretty simple, kind of like javelin spin. So overall, if anything, javelin spin probably takes more skill than like grasp, because javelin spin actually can displace people, and you can actually use it to put people in bad positions. So yeah, Sigma is a weird one, because there's a good argument to say he's low skill, but people generally don't think of him like that, because while in practice, in theory, Sigma's kit doesn't have a lot of stuff that's super high skill, just kind of normal projectiles, normal shields without the extra restrictions you get with Reinhardt, and a normal kind of stunning ability. He does have the unique issue of, because he has all these abilities, sometimes he's having to use a higher level of awareness to manage pressure from multiple angles. I think that those are the moments that make me love playing Sigma. I go back and forth on Sigma. He's kind of my comfort pick tank because, there's not that many situations where Sigma is actually bad. But a lot of the time I have moments where I'm like, I feel like I should play Sigma here, but I don't want to. And I feel like it's because the main times I have fun when I'm playing Sigma is the few moments where you get to be big brain with Sigma. And I feel like those moments are when you're using all of your abilities to handle pressure from multiple angles simultaneously. Like, moments like, I remember one time in a game of Nepal on the Shrine, I think it's called Shrine map, the one that's outside that isn't Village. I think it's called Shrine. That map, I remember there was one time as Sigma that we were literally getting attacked from all three sides. That there was a Junkrat that had launched themselves onto the right side of point. There was a Tracer coming up the left stairs, and the tank and the two supports were coming down main. And the tank was a Zarya, and I remember that I just had a moment which just felt sick. I put up a shield down main so that I was blocking the Zarya beam that was coming down main. I turned to my left and I hard predicted where the Tracer was going to blink to and rocked them right where they were going to land and got the kill on them, so I didn't have to worry about that side anymore. And I ran over to the right side where the Junkrat was and used Kinetic Grasp to absorb his bombs so that they couldn't kill my supports. And by the time that the Zarya had managed to get through my shield and walk through it and come after my supports, at that point we'd already dealt with both the pressure from both other sides, and I could retract my shield and go back to fighting the Zarya now that both of their DPS were gone, and I still had my entire team, and we won that. And that felt so good, that moment. And moments like that, I think Sigma are like, it is like a big brain character in those moments, but I feel like you don't get many moments like that. I feel like a lot of the time it really is just all the pressure is coming from in front of you, and you're just cycling, okay, shield, okay, drop shield, okay, Kinetic Grasp, okay, put shield back up, okay, retract shield, okay, rock to get a brief stun, to get some brief like respite from the damage, and put shield back up. And it feels like you're kind of just cycling that for a while, which again takes some skill, but for the most part it's pretty simple. Okay, with all that said, I've said a lot there. I think I'm putting Sigma there. His ult complicates things. His ult is quite advanced. But so is Whole Hog. Whole Hog's actually difficult to use correctly, in my opinion. I feel like a lot of people misuse it. I even misuse it still sometimes. Sometimes I use it in a moment where I'm like, I'm not sure, is this the right moment? Is this the right moment? And then like afterwards I'm like, shit, that kind of wasn't the right moment. I should have used it at a different time. So yeah, I think I'm going to put him in average, and I'm going to put him just below Roadhog. Sojourn. Sojourn, strategically is pretty basic. You got some movement, and, you got to manage that movement, but for the most part, it's pretty basic. There is some predicting of people's movements with, Disruptor Field, but for the most part, you're basically just an aim character as Sojourn. But you're a pretty demanding aim character. You have to be good with both projectile weapons, with your primary fire, and hit scans with your railgun. And the railgun, obviously, you really want to land those headshots for the burst kills, so... Low end of demanding or high end of... high end of... low end of demanding. Put it there. Soldier. Huh. I play a lot of Soldier, just because I feel like he simply gets the job done a lot of the time. Like, I hate to be that basic. I usually like to play more complicated characters. But, like, in terms of DPS, a lot of the time, I mean, DPS, your job is to deal damage. And at the end of the day, Soldier is one of the best for just dealing damage. He's got long range, so you don't have the problem of not being able to get close enough. If you do get close enough, he's got a projectile with his helix rockets, which is mostly effective at close range. So you're not useless at close range. You can kind of fight at any range as Soldier. You can get around wherever you want because you've got sprint, and you've got a biotic field if you don't have good supports. So he's just very self-sufficient and kind of not bad at anything. And so he just kind of does the job that you need. And so that's why I really like playing him. But it's also a reason why, obviously, he's supposed to be quite easy. Would I stick to that? Would I put him maybe a little bit higher? I think I'd stick to that. There is the fact that you have to get good with recoil compensation to aim accurately with him, but I'm not going to lie, it's definitely easier on Soldier than it is with BAP, because it's consistent and non-stop with Soldier, but with BAP it comes in bursts, and that actually makes it harder to control with BAP in my opinion, because with the consistent recoil, that compensation, I can just generally move my mouse down always at the same speed and have it counteract the recoil and basically shoot straight. And I've mostly gotten that down at this point. I kind of, without thinking, a Soldier usually can keep my aim almost perfectly straight, just because I've got it in my head now. I don't even think about it. I just slightly move my mouse down while I'm firing, and it compensates for the recoil. Whereas with BAP, because it's constantly stuttering between move down, don't move down, move down, don't move down, it kind of makes it more difficult to adapt to. So, yeah, probably there. You do still need aim with Soldier, which is why he's not brain dead. Sombra. I know a bunch of you want Sombra here, but you're not getting what you fucking want. Sombra's my favorite DPS in this game, and you can tell me how much you hate me in the comments. But where am I putting her? Don't worry, I'm not putting her Giga Brain. I do think that she is... how much strategic value she brings to the game is undervalued, I do think. But that being said, I am not going to pretend it's so much that she's one of these characters. I think that she is tough. I will put her here. You do need a big brain to play Sombra well, but in fairness, that is kind of... that and half-decent tracking and aim is all you really need. You don't need really good aim with Sombra, and as well as that, even if you aren't very smart with Sombra, sometimes you can win, even if you're dumb as Sombra. Because, okay, the stereotype with Sombra is the Sombra who spam hacks the tank, you know? The tank is just constantly perma-hacked by Sombra. And don't get me wrong, that fucking sucks, and that Sombra isn't being smart by spam hacking the tank. But the thing is, that doesn't win games. That Sombra is devoting her entire existence to hacking the tank, only one of the 5 people on the enemy team, and she's providing next to nothing to her team other than hacking the tank. And while the tank might have a rougher time because they're being hacked, they're still providing some value to their team. Essentially, it's having a 4 versus 4.5 rather than a 5v5. So really, the Sombra isn't really doing a lot in that situation. That only really works if the tank on the enemy team was the one carrying the enemy team, and so the second the Sombra comes in to ruin the tank's fun, now it's unwinnable. But in reality, as frustrating as it is to be perma-hacked by a Sombra as a tank, that Sombra is probably not winning the game if they are spending the whole game chasing you around hacking you. They are succeeding making you miserable, but they're not succeeding winning the game usually, because they are not providing enough value to their team. So I would contend that usually Sombra is actually a relatively high skill character, because you do have to get very creative with your positioning. You've got to make sure that your translocator is as close to the enemies, or sometimes even in their spawn, as possible if you want to get maximum value out of it by reducing the time it takes to get back to the enemies after you've translated translocator to escape, but you also need to put it somewhere where it won't likely be found and broken, so you don't get caught out with no escape option. And you also need to make sure that you put it somewhere where you're likely to be able to get healed, so you can get back to full health once you're done. No, that does not mean that you just hack a health pack and drop the translocator on it. I know that's what most Sombras do, but if you didn't know, that's actually really dumb. It makes your translocator really easy to find, and on top of that, a lot of the time, the health pack that you'll put it on is going to be too far away from the rest of the fight, most of the time, not always. I find it's best usually to find a health pack that's a bit out of the way that most people don't go to, but is still relatively close to the enemies, and usually closer to the enemy side of the map than your side of the map. And then find a room that people rarely enter next to that, health pack, and place your translocator in a corner of that room where it's hard to spot. And then almost never will someone actually come and find it, because if you put it in a room that people don't go into anyway, they're not going to, go into it. And even if they do go into it, if you put it in a good corner, there's a good chance they won't even spot it. And on top of that, if they go looking for your translocator, and they find the health pack you keep going to, but your translocator isn't there, they're going to be like, what? Oh, it must be another health pack, and start looking at other health packs. Yeah, just realised this isn't supposed to be a Sombra tutorial, but either way, that's just a bit of nuance towards a translocator. As well as that, not to mention that you should know when to discard your escape route as Sombra when you think you're able to do it, and destroy your own translocator to instead start using it as a mobility option, since you essentially can go wherever you throw it. For example, if you are maybe fighting a Kiriko and you get her to 1 health, but then she wall climbs on top of a building and runs away, if you realise that no one came to help the Kiriko, and they're still 1 health, and they don't have any way of getting to anyone to help them, then you should probably destroy your translocator and chuck a new one all the way up where the Kiriko is, and teleport up to them and finish them off. Stuff like that. Either way, Sombra is a character that requires a lot of strategy to play effectively. You need to identify when people are at their weakest, and when their positioning is poor, you need to have good positioning yourself, you need to get creative as often as possible, and you need to be able to play mind games. However, again, hack does not take a whole lot of skill, and if worse comes to worse on Sombra, you can always get at least some level of value by just perma-hacking the tank, and yes, that's not the smart way to play Sombra, and if that's all you do, you won't provide a lot of value, but it does mean that when you do have someone as Sombra who maybe isn't the best, who usually is trying to go for the back line, but every now and then just fucks up, they can just start perma-hacking the enemy tank and at least get some value off of Sombra, and as long as they did something besides perma-hacking the enemy tank, sometimes they can still win off of that. So I think tough is a fair ranking for her. Symmetra. Once again, a reminder that this is talking about this is like giving a favorability to high skill ceilings. So I'm not ranking someone low just because they are brain dead at lower ranks. That will factor in, it will reduce that ranking if they are brain dead at lower ranks, but the main thing that matters is whether they are big brain at high ranks. And I think that applies to Symmetra too. But how much does it apply? I think I'm going to put it all the way up here. Especially after her most recent rework, which I have mixed feelings on, Symmetra now has a much better ability to actually hit people with a secondary fire, which means that she doesn't so much rely on just getting close enough to beam you or hit you with sentry turrets. A lot of Symmetra, for the most part now, is being able to poke with your secondary fire and being able to do creative teleporter plays to catch people off guard or surprise them with turret nests. So overall, I think Symmetra is a relatively big brain character, who I think, honestly, if you're pushing her to her limits, it's probably even harder than Sombra, honestly. I kind of am surprised to be saying that, considering I prefer Sombra, but if I'm honest with myself, it's probably true, even though my average game with Symmetra probably isn't as skillful as Sombra, because, half your games on Symmetra you can just win with turrets and beam. I will say, though, for the people who do say that you can just put down turrets and win for free on Symmetra, while it is true at lower ranks, I will say this: after the most recent rework, the turret's DPS has been absolutely dumpstered. Turrets only do 15 damage per second now, if I remember correctly. So that means that if you're dying to turrets, you are really, really not doing a good job of playing around them, because you literally 3 turrets on a squishy now takes longer than 4 seconds to kill them without any help. Now, in fairness, they also slow you down, and I think that's the bigger threat. But if that's the part that's catching you out, then clearly it's not the turrets that's killing you, really. Clearly it's the fact that you put yourself in a bad position where you didn't account for the fact that there's a Symmetra who could probably slow you down if you came into a certain room and there was turrets there. Torbjorn. This is not going to be all too controversial, I don't think. Yeah. So Torbjorn's projectiles can headshot and are really effective at long range if you got the extremely good aim and predicting, like, and a really good aim, predicting enemy movements. I actually think, honestly, landing shots with Torb takes more skill than landing shots with Hanzo, which makes me tempted to put him above Hanzo. But I can't bring myself to do it because I have to acknowledge that he doesn't really have abilities that take skill. Overload is kind of just press a button and get health, and turret is just kind of drop it down in a spot, and while positioning can matter, it's not all that important and doesn't require all that much skill, and it does it for you, and is also pretty, typical. So yeah, I don't think there's much I have to explain with Torb. His primary fire does take a lot of skill, but that's basically it. Tracer. Okay, so I'm actually intrigued by this. Tracer, to me, at least initially, when I was new to this game, always seemed like a medium skill kind of character. But I see the way people talk about her has always seemed to be like she's up here. And I'm not gonna lie. In my games with Tracer, I don't play a whole lot of Tracer, but I have a lot of success with Tracer. And it does kind of feel like people over-exaggerate how difficult she is. And I hate saying that, because I've said this before, and I've heard the response that it's kind of true at lower ranks, because you can kind of just blink around randomly, and it doesn't really matter if you've got, like, not optimal blinking and all that, and your tracking isn't perfect. People won't punish you just because they can't shoot you. And that maybe that is the case. But I don't know. I was told that years ago, back when I was, like, hard stuck silver, and even now I'm in lobbies with Diamond and Masters players, I still find that while now more often I get caught out on Tracer, still most games I can kind of just run around blinking wherever I want, and no one will really land that many shots on me, and I can kind of just get a bunch of free kills and no one really stops me. Obviously, Tracer takes a good amount of, tracking, and you do have to have good resource management to make sure you don't get caught out with no blinks. You have to know when to press recall, but I don't know, it just seems like a lot of her skills are very just fundamentals. I think I'm going to put her here. And yes, I will say fucking Reinhardt is more difficult than Tracer, fight me. I'm not saying that Tracer's easy. She's above average in difficulty, I think. Because, to be fair, a lot of the games where I do stomp with Tracer and it feels like I don't even have to think to play her, I can just autopilot and wipe a team, we're already doing well anyway. It seems like when you don't have that initial momentum, it's really hard, and you do actually have to kind of sweat on Tracer to pick up the slack. But, man, I don't know, man. I get that tracking is a skill and it's hard to do on Tracer, but, like, tracking is a skill that basically every character needs. So I feel like it's weird that people only bring it up as a skill on Tracer when they don't bring it up on other characters. Widowmaker. So Widowmaker is an interesting one, because it brings up an interesting question. This is technically a character which does not actually require that much skill, if we look at it from a certain perspective. If we look at this from the perspective of what skills does it test, well, you need a little bit of positioning, but for the most part, as Widowmaker, you just need to be able to land shots with a hit-scan weapon that always shoots exactly where you point it, with no recoil to compensate for, no arc, no travel time, no spread. It's just, can you click on heads? And while that's difficult, it's one skill, and it's the only skill you really need to be able to play Widowmaker effectively. Hell, while positioning does matter, bad positioning could even be gotten away with quite often on Widowmaker if you can just land a lucky headshot and kill the person who's diving you for being out of position. So it makes me want to consider if I want to put her lower than you might expect. But at the same time, I know realistically, while it is just one skill, because it's the only skill that you get tested on Widowmaker, if you can't deliver on that skill in absolute spades, which is very, very difficult, then Widowmaker is not a worthwhile pick. So I think I'm going to put Widow here. I'm going to do that. Am I going to stick with this? I'm going to stick with that. Yeah. So I've been playing a lot of Widow recently, not because I like Widow. It's more because I was forced to because I've been running into Widows now that I'm actually getting to higher, skill rank games. I mean, again, I'm not been playing ranked, but just in quick play, my hidden MMR or whatever has gone up, and I'm starting to see crazy Widow players more often who just keep landing headshots. And it's like in those games, I need to be able to swap Widow myself and actually fight back. And Widow, for the longest time, has been one of the characters that I can't play. I feel like I'm finally starting to overcome that now. It's hard to say. Widow games are so feast or famine that I don't know whether I should say it definitively yet. However, I have been in some losing games as Widow, like games that already, like the second I join, it's like fucked. Like one of those games where just no one gets any elims, like your whole team has 0 elims kind of games. I've been Widow on a couple of those games recently, and while we still lost, because I mean that's like really bad. In a lot of those games, I've been the only one with any elims. In one of them recently, my whole team had 0 elims at the end, and I was 4-9. Now, don't get me wrong, going 4-9 isn't good, but on a team where everyone else has 0 elims, and most of them have double-digit deaths, going 4-9, I'm hoping is a sign that even when I have bad games on Widow, I'm still demonstrating more skill than I was before, where it was probably just luck whenever I did get a good game on Widow. And obviously I've had some much better games, like ones where I've gone 21-2 and all that. So I think I'm finally starting to click with Widow. But that being said, yeah, there's a lot of pressure on you on Widow, because if you don't land those shots, you're worthless. That's all you've got is landing shots. You don't even have an ultimate. Well, I mean, you do, but you don't even really have an ultimate that you can use as like even if everything goes poorly, at least I can contribute my ultimate. You don't even have that on Widow. So, considering how badly things will go if you can't deliver on Widow, and the pressure that puts on you, I think it's fair to put her up there. Winton. Okay, this is going to be rough, because I have seen, almost no Winston recently. And on top of that, I actually have played almost no Winston recently. I didn't realize it until recently, but I have not played a whole lot of Winston in a long time. Mostly because Bull is my main tank, and I feel like Bull and Winston have a lot of overlap in use case. And at least for solo queue, Bull is just kind of better at everything Winston does. The only thing that Winston is better at is Winston is better against Sombra, and Winston also is more effective at dive tank if you're playing at coordinated high-level play with Sombra Tracer or Tracer Genji. But if we're talking normal ranked games with randoms, Winston needs that coordination to get kills, and if you don't have that, Wrecking Ball is better. So as a result, unintentionally, I've realised that I've barely played any Winston recently, and unfortunately, with the amount of Bastion going around, I've kind of been scared to play Winston. It feels like I have given him a couple shots, but every time I pick him, when he went really well before in previous seasons, now the second I pick him, I run into a team that just everyone is unkillable, and I can't kill them just by tickling them with the Tesla cannon. So it's like, I pick Winston, I die once, and I swap, and it's like, yep, not a Winston game. So, a bit hard to say, but that being said, I think I'm confident putting Winston here. It's a weird one. I think that Winston is one of the most simple dive tanks in the game, but at the same time, although he's simple, there's still a lot to deliver on. Especially the theoretically optimal combo to jump on someone as Winston is quite difficult. In Overwatch 2 it changed. Obviously in Overwatch 1 it's quite simple. You leap up to someone, you press melee just before you hit the ground to get the melee animation cancel, you then get the leap damage, and then you instantly start Tesla cannoning them, and there you go. There's your combo. But you get one extra point in Overwatch 2. You can use the secondary fire while you're in midair from the initial leap, and if you can actually land the shot on the person before you land and then melee cancel, you get an extra 50 damage. So when you combine that 50 damage from the secondary fire with the 30 damage from the quick melee that gets animation cancelled, and you add that onto the 50 damage from a perfect leap if you land right in the center, that means that you can burst someone for up to 130 HP as Winston before you even start using your primary fire on them. The second you hit the ground, you've done 130 burst damage to them. But that's really difficult to do consistently. I've found it easy to do in the training range on bots, but, if you're actually in a game where people are moving around and people are going to try and, counteract you, it's really difficult to jump up into the air, start charging a secondary fire, land your fully charged secondary fire on a target midair, then land precisely on the target, and animation cancel a punch as you land, and then start Tesla cannoning them. And that's beyond just the basic mechanics that you have to get good with Winston, knowing when to get in, when to get out, when to pop primal juggling, when to use bubble effectively, how to use bubble to deny heals, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would say that Winston's at the top end of demanding. He's grazing the Gear Brain category, but I think the main reason he doesn't quite hit it is just because you don't need a whole lot of mechanical skill to play him for the most part. So yeah. Wrecking Ball. Wrecking Ball is Giga Brain. I would put him... Actually, I'd probably put him... I think I'm going to put him lower than Lucio. It's difficult. I don't know, it could just be because Wrecking Ball is my most played tank and he clicks quite naturally with me. But I feel like Lucio movement actually feels a bit more difficult than Wrecking Ball movement, even though Wrecking Ball has more movement tech. I don't know, Wrecking Ball movement came very naturally to me, but Lucio movement, I still feel like I have to learn it. And I don't know if that's just because I played more Wrecking Ball than Lucio, or if it's actually because Lucio movement is harder. Hard to say. But yeah, Wrecking Ball, much the same as Doomfist. A lot of movement tech, a lot of game sense and knowledge needed to stay alive on this character and make space effectively on them. And a lot of people that you have to be extremely wary of. So I guess let's talk about the differences instead. The reason why Wrecking Ball is lower than Doomfist. I think that Wrecking Ball has one upside compared to Doomfist and one downside. Well, obviously there's more than that, but if we're talking about big main points. The upside is that Wrecking Ball's movement is slightly better, and while still very difficult to master, slightly easier. Slightly. And that means that he's a bit more accessible, and he also, while still being very high skill, and that he also gets to move around a little bit faster than Doomfist typically. The downside is that while both characters are characters that most people in the game can really screw with, I think Wrecking Ball gets fucked with more than any other character in this game. Except maybe Reinhardt. Maybe. The thing is that, depending on your perspective, basically every character in this fucking game counts as Wrecking Ball, no joke. Anyone who has any kind of CC counters Wrecking Ball. Discord Orb counters Wrecking Ball. Anti-heal counters Wrecking Ball. Having a long-range hit scan weapon counters Wrecking Ball because it catches him while he's trying to escape. Having any kind of way to pull people, having any kind of slowdown counters Wrecking Ball. Having good mobility counters Wrecking Ball because it allows you to avoid getting booted off the map, and it also allows you to chase an escaping Wrecking Ball. Mechanics like Soujorn's charge with a railgun, where shooting someone gives you an inherent benefit, obviously counters Wrecking Ball because, you know, you just let people farm their resources from shooting you. Hack counters Wrecking Ball. Tracer with her mobility counters Wrecking Ball. High spread weapons counter Wrecking Ball because they deal more damage because more of the pellets land because of the fact that he's such a big fat target. Everything in this goddamn game counters Wrecking Ball. Now, obviously, when I say this, I'm saying it a bit facetiously. Like, a good example of what I mean is, does Bastion counter Wrecking Ball? Now, if you ask your average player, I imagine a lot of people would say yes. I mean, what does Wrecking Ball do to Bastion? But the real answer is no. If anything, Bastion is one of the very few good matchups Wrecking Ball has, because Wrecking Ball can just roll circles around Bastion, and what's he going to do? Is he going to go in turret form? The second that he uses his entire turret form just to deal with this Wrecking Ball, the Wrecking Ball rolls away, and then they've wasted their turret form, one of the most valuable cooldowns. And then, on top of that, when they run out of turret form, the Wrecking Ball just comes rolling back at them. Now what do? They got no cooldowns, and they're a big fat easy target for the Wrecking Ball to shoot, and they're going to die before the Wrecking Ball dies. So, yeah. Bastion actually does not counter Wrecking Ball, but he does, quote-unquote, counter Wrecking Ball. He counters a Wrecking Ball who doesn't play around the fact that he, you know, can give him hell if he lets him. And because every single character in this goddamn game can give you hell if you let them as Wrecking Ball, it means that you have to be taking into consideration so many things that can go wrong at any time. So, yeah, there are some things about Wrecking Ball that make him easier. The fact that his movement isn't quite as complicated as Doomfist, and the fact that he's got a little bit more survivability than Doomfist. But there are things that are harder as well, in that you have to, you know, micromanage all these different things where, yes, you still have to micromanage all these different ways you can be fucked over as Doom, but you have more ways you can be fucked over as Ball. At least if you get booped as Doom, it usually isn't a big deal. If you get booped as Ball, it can be your death. Zarya. You know what? I'm gonna fucking say it. Am I moving her from there? No. No, I'm not. You know how I said that Orisa is a character where the only skill you really need to demonstrate is patience with you pressing your buttons? You know, I take that back. Zarya is the tank in this game where the only skill you need to demonstrate is patience with your buttons. I fucking hate Zarya, man. And I think she's both the fun police and she's extremely unfun to play too because she has such little skill expression. It's not hard to aim with Zarya. It's your ability. You literally have one ability. You have two technically, but the second one is just using the ability on an ally rather than yourself. And that ability is just an instant I don't die because I press this button. And you get two of them now. Wonderful. And a character who gets to have stupid damage output. Now, there are things with Zarya, like with any character, that can take skill. Effective grabs can be big brain, parkouring around by launching yourself with right clicks can take skill, and landing good right clicks can also take skill. But let's be real, most of the time with Zarya you're holding down beam, and does that take a lot of skill? I think not. At least with Orisa, your ult is a bit more, you have to get a bit more creative with it, in my opinion. It's not usually effective if you just press it on a crowd of people. You kind of have to be a bit more thinking ahead. Is this pulling them out of position? Are they going to be somewhat restricted in their mobility when I pull them in so that they can't get away? Stuff like that. Whereas with Zarya, I feel like you don't have to think about this stuff as much. And the other reason why I think Orisa is actually a little bit more like skill demanding than Zarya is because at least it's actually kind of difficult to land a spear if it's anywhere other than point blank range. And finally, Zen. I'm going to preface this by saying I think Zen got dumber with his most recent nerf. There. Okay. Yeah, no, I'll stick with that. I think Zen used to be average, because you did need good aim with the, orbs. You didn't really have to think about who to discord, because you just discord the tank for the most part, but you did have to think about your positioning a lot. Because as Zen, as a character who is intentionally designed to have no tools to help them against a dive, it only makes sense that you should play really, really far back. And so you had to have smart and careful positioning with Zen to avoid dying, and keeping low deaths on Zen was one of the best things you could do. Now that's not the case so much now, though. Zen's gotten weird. You see, in fairness, one thing that was always a little bit weird about Zen is that he wants to play far back because that's the only way you can be safe from dive, and because his Harmony and Discord Orb have infinite range. They just need line of sight, so, you can be as far back as you like and still provide value. As long as you can see your allies and see your enemy tank, you're providing value, even if you're not even landing shots. And as long as you don't die, that's great. And you're getting ult charge for your Transcendence as well, which is also going to be very valuable. Here's the thing, though. In Overwatch 2, with the addition of Snap Kick, Zen's kind of a bit effective at close range now because of how much damage he does at close range and the fact that his kick is literally more powerful than a Lucio boop. And then you also take into account the fact that Zen is a projectile character, so technically it's easier to land shots up close, and his orbs are pretty big, so landing headshots becomes easier when people are up close. And then you remember how fast he can kill up close, especially when comboed with his kick, and then they come in with the nerf to Discord Orb. Now don't get me wrong, Discord Orb needed a nerf, because Discord Orb makes the game miserable for tanks. Seriously, the fact that they allowed this character to exist, where you just look at an enemy tank, and just before looking at them, they are now going to explode and die 25% faster permanently for the rest of the game. And the only way to break this is to break line of sight with the Zen, but the second that you peek them again, they just put it back on you with no cooldown. That is stupid, man. And don't get me wrong, I'm glad they're considering nerfs to Discord Orb, but here's the problem. The nerf they gave was to severely reduce the range of Discord Orb. Now, do you know why that's stupid? It means that it encourages Zen to play up close rather than far back. And that was the one part of Zen that I thought actually took a decent amount of skill, was the positioning. But now the positioning's out the window. Now you're kind of encouraged at Zen to play relatively far forward, because if you get dived, well, you can just discord the person diving you, dink, headshot, kick. You can get away with some dumb positioning on Zen now, and it feels like you're encouraged to do so, considering the fact that you can't at all provide the value you used to be able to from a long range anymore. So yeah, Zen is now a character with very little positioning knowledge, and mostly just all aim no brain for the most part. Although there is still brain in when to use Transcendence, since you kind of go back and forth between using it just to save yourself and using it to save your team. Well, with that said, that's my list. Now let me just double check that I'm happy with this. As for our top tier, hardest characters in the game, we've got Doomfist, Lucio, Wrecking Ball, Genji, and Baptiste, and I think I stand by that. For our more demanding characters, we got Winton, Anna, Diva. I might swap Diva and Junker Queen. I think, yeah, swap those around and swap those around. Symmetra, Widowmaker. No, I'll keep that. And Soujorn. For the tough characters, ones that a little bit harder than your average character, but not crazy hard, you got actually, I'll swap Sombra and Reinhardt even. Reinhardt, Sombra, Tracer, and Ashe. For your average skill level characters, I think I'll swap these around. You got Mercy, Mei, Roadhog. Actually, I'll keep moving this. There we go. Mercy, Roadhog, Sigma, Ramatra, and Mei. Sorry, yeah, I keep moving it. There we go. I'm happy with that. But your more relaxed characters, where you still got to think, but maybe you don't have to sweat so much to play them. You've got Brig, you got Zen, you got Alari, you got Echo, you got Hanzo, and you got Cass. For your kinda easy characters, you got Junkrat, Torbjorn, Bastion, Lifeweaver, and Soldier. And for your brain-dead characters that I think are the easiest characters in the game to play that require the least skill, you have Moira, Pharah, Kiriko, Orisa, Zarya, and Reaper. In that order. Yep, I think I stand by this. Well, all that said, I imagine that some people are going to have some choice words for this, so let me know in the comments. If you think your main should be lower or higher, let me know about it, why you think that. And thank you for watching. This one probably ended up being a long one, so I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.